Welcome to the world of daily life stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss new stories. Enjoy listening. The Arrival. Erica Johnson stood before the grand entrance of the Starlight Hotel, her breath catching in her chest as she gazed at the shimmering marble exterior that gleamed in the afternoon sunlight. The ornate bronze doors, etched with intricate designs of floral patterns, beckoned her forward. She had dreamed of visiting this hotel for years, ever since she had first seen the photos of it on a travel blog. The luxury, the elegance, the perfect blend of modernity and classic charm, it was everything she had ever imagined. Today, it would become her reality. For Erica, this vacation was more than just a getaway. It was a reward for her hard work. As a nurse in the emergency room, her life had been consumed by long, exhausting shifts, often with little time for herself. The endless calls, the pressure to save lives, and the overwhelming emotional toll had left her feeling drained. But now, she was standing at the threshold of a new chapter, one filled with relaxation, luxury, and the promise of recharging her spirit. Taking a deep breath, Erica adjusted the strap of her small, navy blue suitcase and stepped forward. She could feel the weight of the world lifting off her shoulders with each step. She was finally free from the sterile, hurried environment of the hospital. It was time to indulge in a few days of bliss. She had carefully planned every moment of this trip, from the scenic spa treatments to the gourmet dinners she couldn't wait to savor. Everything was going to be perfect. The scent of freshly bloomed flowers greeted her as she entered through the revolving doors, instantly transporting her into a world of sophistication. The lobby of the Starlight Hotel was grand, a blend of contemporary and classical elements that took her breath away. The polished floors reflected the light of crystal chandeliers, and sleek marble columns supported the high ceilings, adding to the sense of luxury. Everywhere she looked, there was beauty, tall potted plants, velvet seating areas, and the faint sound of a pianist playing a soft tune from the grand piano at the corner. Erica's gaze drifted toward the front desk, where a middle-aged man with a neatly pressed suit stood. He looked up from his paperwork as she approached, and she couldn't help but notice the small hint of surprise in his eyes as he took in her appearance. "Good afternoon, ma'am. Welcome to the Starlight Hotel. How may I assist you today?" His tone was polite, but there was an edge of formality that she couldn't quite place. Erica smiled, her nerves returning slightly at the thought of speaking to someone so polished, but she steadied herself. She had been practicing her self-assurance for months, reminding herself that she deserved this, that she had earned every bit of it. "I have a reservation under Erica Johnson," she replied confidently. "I'm here for the 4-night stay, with the deluxe suite booked." The man's eyes flickered down to his computer screen, his fingers tapping the keys with precision as he searched for her name. The seconds stretched into what felt like minutes, and Erica stood silently, trying to hide the unease that began to creep into her chest. There was something about the way he was acting that made her feel scrutinized. She brushed it off, chalking it up to nerves. After all, she had worked hard for this moment. It was just her imagination. Finally, the man looked back at her, his face suddenly tight. "Ms. Johnson, I'm afraid I don't see a reservation under that name," he said, his voice clipped, almost dismissive. Erica's heart skipped a beat. "That's impossible," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I confirmed everything last week. I have the email confirmation right here on my phone." She quickly pulled out her phone, swiping through the email to find the confirmation number. As she did so, the man's gaze remained fixed on her, a curious mix of confusion and doubt in his eyes. She didn't understand what was happening. When she finally found the email, she handed her phone to him. "Here," she said, her voice a little sharper now. "I don't know why this isn't showing up, but I can assure you that I'm here for the reservation." The man glanced at the phone and then back at her, an almost imperceptible shake of his head before he looked away. "I'm afraid I'll have to check with my manager," he said coolly. "Please wait here." Erica stood frozen for a moment, her mind racing. Was this some kind of mistake? But she had paid in full, and everything had been confirmed. Why was he acting like this? She glanced around the lobby, trying to distract herself, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The whole ambience of the hotel felt out of place now, the elegance of the space suddenly tainted by an underlying sense of discomfort. The pleasant background music, the lavish decor, all seemed to blur into insignificance as her mind swirled with confusion and anxiety. Moments later, a man appeared from the back office. He was tall and well-groomed, his sharp suit making him look like he belonged in a high-powered boardroom. Erica stood up straighter, hoping that this was just a misunderstanding. Surely, this could be cleared up easily. But when the manager, Mr. Thompson, looked at her, she felt a chill. His eyes scanned her from head to toe, and his expression seemed almost skeptical. Erica's heart began to race again as he approached the desk. "What seems to be the problem here?" he asked, his voice deep and authoritative. The desk clerk hesitated before speaking. "There's no reservation under Ms. Johnson's name, sir. She's insisting that she has one, but we can't seem to locate it." Mr. Thompson turned his attention back to Erica, his gaze lingering longer than it should. "Is that so?" he asked, his voice laced with a hint of condescension. "And what exactly brings you to the Starlight Hotel, Ms. Johnson?" Erica, now feeling the weight of his scrutiny, replied with a forced calmness. "I'm here for a vacation. I made a reservation for a deluxe suite, and I have all the details right here on my phone." Mr. Thompson's lips curled slightly, an unreadable expression crossing his face. "A vacation, you say? I'm afraid the hotel may not be able to accommodate you at this time." Erica frowned. "I'm sorry, but there must be some mistake. I've booked this trip well in advance, and I've already paid for everything. Could you please double-check the reservation?" Mr. Thompson's eyes narrowed, and Erica felt a sudden, uncomfortable heat rising in her chest. Something about the way he was looking at her felt like more than just an innocent mistake. There was a palpable sense of judgment, as though he was questioning her very right to be there. "You see," he said slowly, his voice dripping with a tone of disdain, "this is a luxury hotel, and we have certain standards for our guests. I'm not sure that this is the kind of environment that suits, well, people like you." The words hung in the air, heavy with an unspoken implication. Erica's blood ran cold as the realization hit her. She had just been humiliated, not because of a mistake in her reservation, but because of something far deeper, something far darker. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, but Erica refused to let them fall. She had faced prejudice before, but never quite like this. She had worked her entire life to get to this point, and she wasn't going to let anyone take it from her. "Excuse me," she finally said, her voice trembling but firm. "Are you saying that I don't belong here because of the color of my skin?" Mr. Thompson's eyes flickered, as if he had said something that hadn't quite been intended. But it was too late. The damage was done. Erica stood there, frozen in a mix of shock and fury, as the full weight of his words settled over her. But what she did next would shake the foundations of the hotel, the manager, and perhaps her own destiny in ways no one could ever have predicted. Erica's breath hitched in her chest, and for a moment the entire world seemed to pause. She stood there, staring at Mr. Thompson, her mind racing, trying to process what had just been said. She had heard things like this before, though never so overt, never so blatantly discriminatory. People had always been more subtle, more veiled in their biases. But not him. Mr. Thompson's words were cold and calculated, as if he had believed the judgment he had passed over her was justified, as if her mere presence in the lobby of the Starlight Hotel was an anomaly that needed to be corrected. For the first time in a long while, Erica felt like an outsider. It wasn't just the sneer on his face or the dismissive way he had spoken to her, it was the overwhelming sense that she didn't belong here, that she wasn't worthy of this moment. The luxury that the hotel represented wasn't for people like her. She was used to this feeling, of course. She had grown up in a world that often made her feel invisible, and as she rose through the ranks in her career as a nurse, she had always had to work twice as hard to prove her worth. But this? This was different. This was an insult, not just to her, but to everything she had worked for. Still, she couldn't let him see the hurt. She had spent too many years suppressing those emotions, learning to rise above the slights and subtle discrimination that often came her way. Erica clenched her fists, forcing her body to stand tall, reminding herself of why she was there in the first place. She was a hardworking, dedicated woman who had earned her place in the world. She had earned this vacation. The life she had built wasn't a product of luck, it was the result of countless hours of dedication and sacrifice. Nothing Mr. Thompson could say or do would take that away from her. "You don't know anything about me," she said finally, her voice steady, despite the storm of emotions brewing inside her. "I didn't come here to be judged by someone like you. I came here to relax, to get away from all the struggles and stress that come with being a black woman in this world. I don't need your approval, and I don't need your permission to stay here. I'm here on my own merit, and I belong just as much as anyone else in this hotel." Mr. Thompson blinked, clearly taken aback by Erica's firm response. He had expected her to retreat, to be cowed by his words. But instead, she stood her ground, her posture strong and unyielding. There was a brief moment of silence before he spoke again, his voice colder than before. "You're right about one thing," he said, his words dripping with disdain. "You're here on your own merit. But in a place like this, your merit doesn't matter. It's about status, image, and who you know. You don't belong here, not in a hotel like this." Erica felt the rage building inside her. She had heard these kinds of things before, hadn't everyone who looked like her? She had fought against these assumptions all her life, and she wasn't about to let some arrogant man with a superiority complex take away what she had rightfully earned. She wasn't about to walk away from this battle, no matter how difficult it seemed. A small voice in the back of her mind told her to turn around and leave, to find another place to stay, to avoid the confrontation altogether. But that voice was quiet, almost non-existent, drowned out by the fire of determination that burned through her. She wasn't just fighting for herself, she was fighting for every black woman who had ever been told she didn't belong, for every person who had ever been made to feel small because of their race. She wasn't going to let this man win. "I've had enough," she said, her voice firm but controlled. "I don't need to prove anything to you. I'm going to report you to your higher-ups, and trust me, they'll hear about how you've treated me." She reached into her purse and pulled out her phone, her fingers trembling slightly as she began typing out an email to the hotel's corporate office, detailing what had just happened. Mr. Thompson's face flushed with anger as he watched her type. "You think they'll believe you?" he sneered. "You're just some random woman with no connections, no power. No one's going to listen to you." Erica didn't flinch. She had heard it all before. She had been dismissed in the past, ignored when she spoke up, but she knew better now. She knew that her voice mattered, that her story would be heard. And if not by this hotel's management, then by others. She would take this as far as it needed to go. Just as she was about to hit send on her email, the door to the back office swung open, and another man walked into the lobby. This time, he was different from Mr. Thompson, older, with a much gentler expression on his face. He wore a suit just like the manager, but there was something warmer in his eyes, a kind of empathy that Mr. Thompson lacked. He immediately noticed the tension in the air and the confrontation taking place in the lobby. "Is there a problem here?" the man asked, his voice calm but authoritative. Mr. Thompson immediately turned to the new arrival, a tight smile on his face as he tried to regain control of the situation. "No, there's no problem. Everything is fine." His eyes flickered toward Erica, a warning in them. "This woman is causing a scene, but I've already explained to her that she doesn't belong here." The older man's gaze moved from Mr. Thompson to Erica, and for a long moment, he simply observed her. Then, without saying a word, he turned to the front desk clerk and motioned for him to pull up the reservation system. The clerk complied quickly, and after a few moments of scanning, the man nodded. "I see the issue now," he said softly. "There was a mix-up in the system. Ms. Johnson, your reservation is here. It was simply under a different name. We sincerely apologize for the inconvenience and misunderstanding. Please, allow us to correct this immediately." You are, of course, welcome to stay with us. Mr. Thompson's face turned beet red as the older man continued to speak, completely ignoring his previous claims. I will make sure you are personally escorted to your suite, Ms. Johnson. It's on the house for the misunderstanding. We are extremely sorry for the way you've been treated here. This is not the experience we want our guests to have. Erica couldn't believe what she was hearing. For a moment, she was too stunned to speak. The weight of the past few minutes had been so overwhelming that she hadn't fully processed what was happening. But as the reality set in, she felt a rush of gratitude, not just for the man who had corrected the mistake, but for the validation she had received. She had stood up for herself, and it had paid off. The older man turned to Mr. Thompson with a stern look. You will be having a conversation with me later, he said, his voice laced with authority. This behavior is unacceptable and does not represent the values of this hotel. Without another word, the older man gestured for Erica to follow him, and she did, feeling a mixture of relief and exhaustion as she walked away from the front desk. She had faced something ugly, something that had shaken her to her core. But now, she was being treated with the respect she deserved. The suite was magnificent, even more luxurious than she had imagined, but it wasn't the opulence of the room that filled her with a sense of peace. It was the feeling of standing tall in the face of adversity, of reclaiming her space in a world that often tried to diminish her. As she unpacked her suitcase and settled into the suite, Erica reflected on what had just transpired. She had fought back, and in doing so, she had not only won the battle with Mr. Thompson but had reaffirmed her own worth. This was her moment to rest, to heal, and to embrace everything she had worked so hard for. The luxury, the elegance, the relaxation, she was deserving of it all. And no one, not even a racist manager in a five-star hotel, would take that away from her. With a sense of quiet triumph, Erica sank into the plush armchair by the window and looked out over the city skyline, knowing that her story was far from over. This was just the beginning. She had faced adversity head-on and had emerged stronger, and now, she was ready to take on whatever the world had in store. She had found her voice, and no one would silence it. The night passed with an air of surreal calmness. Erica lay back on the plush bed in her suite, staring at the ceiling, her mind replaying the events of the day. She had come to the Starlight Hotel hoping for a few days of peace and luxury, but what had happened instead had been far more than she could have anticipated. It wasn't just the tension with Mr. Thompson or the prejudice he had shown her, it was the realization that even in the most refined and luxurious places, racism could still exist. It was everywhere, even in the places you least expected, the places where people were supposed to be treated with respect and dignity. But now, here in this suite, one she knew she deserved, she felt a strange mixture of emotions. Anger. Relief. Triumph. And perhaps, most importantly, a sense of empowerment. She had fought back. She had stood her ground. And she had been heard. In a world that so often silenced the voices of people like her, she had reclaimed her space, her right to exist fully and unapologetically. That, more than anything else, was what made her feel truly victorious. As the sun began to rise the following morning, Erica rose with it, determined to make the most of the time she had. She had already made plans to visit the spa in the hotel, a place she had been dreaming of for weeks. She had spent too long putting everyone else's needs ahead of her own, and now it was her turn to be taken care of. Her body, her soul, she needed a break, a moment to unwind from the relentless pressure of work and life. And, after the incident the day before, she felt she deserved it more than ever. After a quick breakfast in the hotel's elegant dining room, where the staff treated her with an attentiveness that felt worlds apart from the previous day's treatment, Erica made her way to the spa. The soothing scents of lavender and chamomile greeted her as she entered the dimly lit room, and the soft sound of water trickling from the fountains in the corner helped ease the tension in her shoulders. She was led to a private room where the massage therapist, a woman named Clara, began the treatment with a calming introduction. "Everything here is about your relaxation and comfort," Clara said in a soothing voice as she adjusted the lighting and temperature. "You're free to let go of everything, Erica. Just breathe, and let the world melt away." For the next hour, Erica allowed herself to fully relax, to surrender to the moment. The tension from her body, tension that had been building for years, slowly faded with every gentle movement of Clara's hands. She felt her muscles loosen, her thoughts quiet, and the heaviness in her chest slowly lift. She needed this. She needed this space to just breathe, to exist without the weight of expectations and judgment bearing down on her. After the massage, Clara offered Erica a cup of tea and invited her to rest for a few moments in a relaxation room filled with soft cushions and calming music. As Erica sipped the tea, she closed her eyes and allowed herself to drift into a state of peace she hadn't known in a long time. She wasn't thinking about Mr. Thompson or the injustices she had faced. She wasn't worrying about her career or the pressures of being a black woman in a predominantly white industry. For the first time in months, her mind was at ease. She felt like she could finally take a breath without the weight of the world on her shoulders. When she finally left the spa, Erica felt as if she were walking on air. She walked through the hotel's marble hallways with her head held high, her posture more confident, more assured. She had found her center again, a place of peace within herself that she hadn't realized had been missing for so long. She wasn't just a nurse. She wasn't just a woman who had been subjected to racism and prejudice her whole life. She was Erica Johnson, a force to be reckoned with, and she was worthy of every good thing life had to offer. The afternoon passed in a blur of relaxation and indulgence. She spent time by the pool, reading a book she had been meaning to finish for months. She enjoyed a long lunch at the hotel's gourmet restaurant, savoring the flavors of a dish she had never tasted before. The chef, who had been apprised of her experience with Mr. Thompson the previous day, came to her table personally to apologize for the incident, assuring her that the management had already taken steps to ensure it would never happen again. At that moment, Erica realized something important. She had come to the hotel expecting luxury, expecting to be treated as just another guest, another paying customer. What she hadn't expected was for the hotel to go above and beyond to make things right. The staff, the management, even the chef, they had all gone out of their way to show her that the actions of one individual didn't define the whole organization. They wanted to make her feel welcome, wanted to ensure that her experience was one she would remember for all the right reasons. But it wasn't just the hotel's apology that mattered. It was the way the situation had been handled. The older man who had intervened, the one who had corrected Mr. Thompson's actions, was not just a manager in a luxury hotel. He was a man who believed in the values of fairness, dignity, and respect. He had seen Erica as a person first, not as a label or a stereotype. And in doing so, he had not only proven the worth of the hotel staff but also reminded Erica of the importance of standing up for what is right. Later that evening, after another decadent meal, Erica returned to her suite, where she decided to spend the rest of the night reflecting on what she had learned from her experience. She sat by the window, gazing out over the sparkling lights of the city below. Her heart was full, not just because she had had a relaxing day, but because she had learned something more important than any luxury could provide. She had learned the value of self-worth. The next morning, Erica woke up early, eager to begin her day. She had planned to spend the day exploring the city, but as she dressed, her phone rang. She glanced at the screen and saw that it was from an unknown number. Curiosity piqued, she answered the call. "Hello, is this Erica Johnson?" a deep voice on the other end of the line asked. "Yes, this is she," Erica replied. "My name is Martin Blackwell. I'm the general manager of the Starlight Hotel. I wanted to personally apologize for the unfortunate experience you had yesterday. We take these matters very seriously, and I wanted to let you know that we've reviewed the incident with Mr. Thompson, and appropriate disciplinary actions have been taken." Erica's breath caught in her throat. She wasn't expecting this level of personal attention, nor was she prepared for the sincerity in his voice. "I appreciate you reaching out," she said, her voice steady but full of emotion. "I'm glad to hear that the situation is being handled. But, honestly, I wasn't sure what to expect when I first arrived here. I've faced things like this before, but the way the hotel responded, it meant a lot to me." "I'm glad to hear that," Martin said warmly. It's important to us that all of our guests feel welcomed and respected. You deserve that, Erica. Please know that we are committed to ensuring that this doesn't happen again, not just for you, but for anyone who stays with us. You are always welcome here. As the call ended, Erica felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. It wasn't just that she had received an apology. It was that someone, a person in power, had taken her experience seriously. She had been heard, validated, and respected. It wasn't just the luxury of the hotel or the amenities that made this experience so memorable. It was the way the hotel staff had treated her, the way they had acknowledged her humanity and worth. That day, as Erica walked through the streets of the city, she realized something. She didn't need anyone's approval to live her life, to take up space in this world. She had everything she needed inside of her. And while the incident with Mr. Thompson had shaken her, it had also strengthened her resolve. She would not let the actions of one man or one situation define her. She was more than capable of handling whatever came her way, and this was just another chapter in her journey. One where she had triumphed, where she had proven her strength, not through silence, but through standing up for what was right. And as the sun began to set on her final evening at the Starlight Hotel, Erica felt a peace she hadn't known in years. She had come for a vacation. But what she had found was a renewed sense of self, something far more valuable than luxury. She had found her voice. And nothing, not even the ugliness of prejudice, could take that away from her. The days that followed Erica's encounter with Mr. Thompson were nothing short of transformative. As she spent her remaining time at the Starlight Hotel, she couldn't help but reflect on the enormity of what had transpired. At the outset of her trip, she had simply been looking for a brief escape, a much-needed respite from her high-stress job in the emergency room. What she hadn't expected was to be thrust into an experience that would shake her foundation, test her resolve, and ultimately push her to reclaim her voice in a way she hadn't done in years. But the lesson wasn't just about standing up to discrimination. It was about self-respect, reclaiming power over her narrative, and learning how to navigate a world that often tried to diminish her worth. For the first time in a long while, Erica allowed herself to be fully present in her life. She had always been the person who carried others, the colleague who took on extra shifts, the friend who listened when others were in need, the woman who had always been the strong one. But in the quiet moments of reflection during her stay at the Starlight Hotel, she realized something crucial: she had been neglecting herself. She had put everyone else's needs ahead of her own, giving without ever considering what she truly needed. That trip, despite the initial setbacks, had reminded her that she deserved just as much care and attention as the people she helped every day. It wasn't selfish to put herself first sometimes. It was necessary. By the time the final evening of her stay rolled around, Erica had experienced a profound shift. Her body was relaxed from the spa treatments, her mind at ease from the time spent in peaceful solitude. But more than that, she had gained something that couldn't be bought or earned with a credit card: she had regained her sense of self-worth. The quiet moments of reflection in the hotel room, the kind conversations with the staff who had gone out of their way to apologize and make amends, and the calls from the management, it had all reaffirmed her belief that she wasn't alone in the world. People were capable of change, capable of growth, and capable of doing the right thing when given the chance. When she checked out of the hotel the next morning, the older man, the one who had intervened with Mr. Thompson, was there to see her off. His name was William Green, the hotel's assistant general manager. He had made a point of checking in with her throughout the course of her stay, ensuring that everything was satisfactory, making sure she was feeling comfortable and respected. He had gone above and beyond, and Erica appreciated his sincerity more than he could ever know. "I just wanted to thank you," Erica said as she stood in the grand lobby, waiting for her taxi. "You didn't have to do all of this, but you did. It's not something I'll forget." William smiled kindly, his expression warm and genuine. "It's our job to make sure that all of our guests feel welcome and respected," he replied. "But you also need to know, Erica, that you're an extraordinary woman. The way you handled everything with Mr. Thompson, it was inspiring. Not many people would have had the courage to stand up the way you did." Erica felt a swell of pride in her chest. She wasn't used to being complimented in such a personal and meaningful way. She had spent much of her life quietly proving herself to others, seeking validation in ways that now seemed unnecessary. But William's words resonated deeply with her. "You've taught me something important, William," Erica said, her voice soft but firm. "That I don't have to ask for permission to take up space in this world. I don't have to explain myself to anyone, especially when I know my worth. And for that, I'll always be grateful." William looked at her for a long moment, his eyes reflecting the sincerity of her words. "You don't have to ask anyone's permission, Erica. You are exactly where you're meant to be." As she left the hotel behind, stepping into the awaiting taxi that would take her back to the airport, Erica felt an overwhelming sense of peace. She wasn't just leaving behind a luxury hotel and a week of relaxation. She was leaving behind a version of herself that had been constrained by fear, by uncertainty, and by the constant need to prove her worth. That version of herself had been holding her back, and now, for the first time in her life, she was stepping into a new chapter of her story. She was stepping into her own power. The flight back to her city felt almost surreal. As the plane ascended, Erica gazed out the window, watching the world below grow smaller and smaller. It wasn't just the distance between the hotel and her home that felt significant. It was the distance between the woman she had been before the trip and the woman she had become during it. She had faced adversity, humiliation, and a profound test of character. But through it all, she had come out stronger. And as she reflected on her journey, she realized that her experience at the Starlight Hotel wasn't just a moment of personal triumph, it was the beginning of something bigger. It was a catalyst for change in her own life, a spark that would fuel her to push boundaries and take risks in ways she had never allowed herself to before. Back in her hometown, life resumed its usual rhythm, but Erica was no longer the same woman who had boarded the plane a week ago. She still worked her long shifts at the hospital, still faced the challenges of her demanding career, but now, each day felt different. She wasn't just going through the motions anymore. She was intentional, focused, and determined to carve out space for herself in the world, without apology. She knew that the world might try to make her feel small again, just as it had done with Mr. Thompson, but she also knew now that she had the power to change the narrative, to rewrite her story. And so, Erica began to make small, but significant changes in her life. She started saying no more often when things were asked of her that didn't align with her values or her boundaries. She began taking time for herself without guilt, whether it was a quiet evening in with a book, a walk in the park, or a day trip to a nearby town. She started advocating for herself more in her work environment, demanding the respect and recognition she deserved, and pushing back against the systemic inequalities that had always existed in the medical field. But perhaps the most profound change came when Erica decided to take her experiences and use them to make a difference in the world. She started writing about her story, about the racism she had faced, and about the lessons she had learned. At first, it was just a journal, a way for her to process her emotions and the challenges she had faced. But soon, her words began to flow onto the page in a way that felt cathartic and purposeful. She realized that by sharing her story, she could inspire others to find their voice as well, to confront the injustices they faced and to reclaim their power in the same way she had done. Erica began speaking at events and conferences, sharing her experiences with others in her community and beyond. She advocated for more diversity and inclusion in healthcare, pushing for changes that would ensure that all patients, regardless of their race, background, or socioeconomic status, were treated with dignity and respect. She became involved in mentoring programs, helping young women, particularly women of color, navigate their own careers in healthcare, and supporting them as they fought for their place in the world. The impact of Erica's journey continued to ripple out, touching the lives of countless people. What had begun as a personal battle against a racist manager had evolved into a movement of empowerment, of strength, and of reclamation. Erica had found her voice, and she was using it not just for herself, but for others. She knew that her journey wasn't over, that there would always be challenges ahead. But she was no longer afraid. She was no longer willing to stay silent. The woman who had once walked into the Starlight Hotel with uncertainty in her heart had transformed into a woman who was unafraid to take up space in a world that often tried to make her feel small. Erica had learned one of life's most powerful truths: when you know your worth, no one can take it from you. And with that knowledge, she walked into the world every day, ready to face whatever came her way, secure in the knowledge that her voice would always be heard. Months passed since Erica's life-altering experience at the Starlight Hotel, but the journey she had embarked upon since then was just beginning. The growth she had experienced didn't just reside in the quiet moments of introspection or in the conversations with those who had shown her compassion and support. It extended into every aspect of her life: how she navigated her career, how she interacted with others, and how she approached the challenges that came her way. She had become someone who no longer questioned her worth or allowed others to dictate her narrative. But most importantly, she had become someone who understood the power of her voice, her choices, and her actions in shaping not just her own future, but the future of others. At the hospital where she worked, Erica had become a quiet force of change. She had long ago learned that systemic issues in any industry, especially healthcare, weren't solved with a single grand gesture. They were tackled slowly, methodically, one conversation at a time, one action at a time. But every conversation mattered. Every action mattered. And the work she was doing, though subtle, was making waves. Her colleagues, both old and new, noticed the change in her. She was still the same diligent, compassionate nurse they had always known, but now, there was a new confidence in her. She didn't shrink when others tried to dismiss her ideas. She didn't falter when faced with the overwhelming demands of her job. She no longer accepted the status quo without questioning it. And most importantly, she wasn't afraid to speak up when things weren't right, whether it was standing up for patients who were being overlooked or challenging leadership when policies seemed unfair or discriminatory. The change wasn't always easy, and there were days when Erica felt the weight of it all, but it was always worth it. Every time she spoke up, every time she said no to something that wasn't right, she felt the strength of her own resolve. But it wasn't just her work that had changed. She had begun to foster deeper relationships with the people in her life: friends, family, and new connections. She was learning to ask for help when she needed it, a lesson she had always struggled with. For years, Erica had been the one people relied on, the pillar of strength, the person who could handle everything without complaint. But now, she understood that being strong didn't mean doing it all alone. She had allowed herself to be vulnerable, to lean on others when she needed support. She had opened up to her friends in a way she never had before, allowing them to be a part of her journey, sharing her struggles and triumphs without shame or hesitation. She wasn't afraid to admit when she was tired, when she was feeling the weight of everything she carried. And, in turn, her relationships grew stronger. One of the most rewarding aspects of this newfound openness was her growing involvement in mentorship programs. Erica had always been a compassionate woman, someone who cared deeply for those around her, especially young women of color who were navigating their own careers in environments that weren't always welcoming. In the past, she had offered advice here and there, but now, she was committed to being a guiding presence in their lives. She poured her heart into these mentoring relationships, offering advice not just about healthcare but about navigating the complexities of the world as a Black woman. She helped her mentor build confidence, embrace their unique voices, and most importantly, trust in their own abilities. One evening, after a particularly rewarding mentorship session, Erica found herself reflecting on the impact of this work. She had shared a story with one of her mentors, a young woman named Amina, about her experience at the Starlight Hotel. Amina had listened with wide eyes, and when Erica finished, she asked, "How did you find the strength to stand up like that? To speak your truth, even when it was hard?" Erica had paused for a moment, considering the question. It was one she had asked herself many times since the incident. The truth was, she hadn't known she had the strength to stand up to Mr. Thompson until she was faced with that moment. It was as if everything she had been through, the struggles, the discrimination, the years of quiet endurance, had built up to that one point in time. She hadn't stood up for herself because she had been prepared to do so. She had done it because, in that moment, it was the only option. She had realized that if she didn't, she would allow someone to diminish her, to tell her that she didn't deserve to take up space in the world. And she couldn't let that happen. She had found her voice not by planning it or practicing it, but by simply listening to her own heart and responding in the way she knew was right. As Erica recounted this to Amina, she realized something. The experience at the Starlight Hotel had been a catalyst, a turning point in her life, but the real change had happened not just in the lobby that day, but in how she had embraced her own worth. She had learned that standing up for herself wasn't just about fighting against others, it was about acknowledging her own power. It was about recognizing that her voice, her story, and her presence mattered. The more Erica thought about this, the more she realized that her journey wasn't just about overcoming one difficult moment. It was about embracing who she was, unapologetically. It was about stepping into the fullness of her own life, her own story, and understanding that her journey was uniquely hers. It was not defined by the biases or limitations that others tried to impose on her. It was defined by her choices, her courage, and her commitment to living authentically. The realization hit her like a wave. Her work as a nurse, her mentoring, her advocacy, these were all ways of honoring herself. They were expressions of her belief in herself and in the value of what she had to offer the world. She had started to see that every act of kindness, every moment of standing firm in her beliefs, every time she used her voice to speak out, whether it was in her personal life or in her professional one, was a way of honoring her journey. And in doing so, she was empowering others to honor their own. It was clear to Erica now that the impact of her story wasn't limited to just herself. She had been a part of something bigger than herself, a wave of change that could ripple out and touch the lives of others. And in the quiet moments when she reflected on everything she had been through, Erica found a deep sense of peace. She had not just survived the challenges life had thrown her way, she had thrived in spite of them. She had learned how to make her voice heard, how to stand up for herself, and how to carry her story with dignity. As the months continued to pass, Erica's confidence continued to grow. She started seeking out speaking engagements, sharing her story with larger audiences, and inspiring others to speak up and stand firm in their own truths. She was invited to speak at conferences, to join panels on diversity and inclusion, and to contribute to articles and blogs that focused on the challenges faced by Black women in healthcare. Her words resonated with people who had experienced similar struggles, who had faced discrimination in ways big and small, and who needed to hear that they were not alone. And yet, despite all the external recognition and accolades, Erica never lost sight of the most important lesson she had learned, that true power came from within. It was not about seeking validation from others or finding approval from the world, it was about knowing, deep in her bones, that she was enough. One afternoon, several years after her transformative experience at the Starlight Hotel, Erica found herself standing in front of a group of young nurses at a diversity and inclusion seminar, ready to share her story once again. As she spoke, she could see the spark in their eyes, the same spark that had once been in her own. And in that moment, Erica knew that her journey had come full circle. She had faced adversity, humiliation, and discrimination, but she had emerged not only unscathed but stronger. She had turned her pain into purpose, her silence into a powerful voice, and her story into a beacon for others to follow. With each word she spoke, Erica felt the weight of her own story settle into her soul. It was a story of survival, of triumph, and of the unbreakable strength of the human spirit. And as she looked out at the sea of eager faces before her, she knew that her journey was far from over. She was just getting started. Because, in the end, the most important thing that Erica had learned was this: life would always present challenges, but no matter what happened, no one could take away her voice, her worth, or the power of her story. And as long as she remembered that, she would continue to rise, to speak, and to inspire others to do the same.